The organization in charge of getting Democrats elected to the United States House of Representatives is the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the DCCC. They do not have an enviable job this year. It is a tough election for Democrats, not only because the economy is bad, not only because it's the first midterm election for this administration, but also, as a lot of people have pointed out, Democrats beat Republicans so badly in 06 and 08 that right now there are a lot of Democratic members of Congress representing pretty conservative House districts around the country, districts that have no real business being represented by an uppercase D Democrat. Districts that, at least on paper, are far more conservative than their having Democratic representation would suggest is sustainable. So Democrats in charge of getting their folks elected, they do not have it easy this year. That said, somebody explain this to me.
Renacci tried to avoid paying his taxes. Renacci's trying to raise yours with a new 23% national sales tax on almost everything you buy.
Nunnally's running for Congress and signed up as a supporter of a 23% national sales tax on cars, groceries, appliances, even toys.
Benishek supported a new 23% national sales tax on almost everything we buy. Clothes, groceries, even gas.
Andy Harris supports a tax plan that would impose a 23% sales tax on nearly everything you buy, while cutting taxes for the wealthy.
23% West now? At the very glossy surface level, like way up here, right? This sort of makes sense at a very meta level. You know, if you don't think about it too much. The idea is to make it seem like the Democrat is running against the taxes guy because the Republican is the taxes guy. It's the sort of very high level take on this. On the other hand, does anybody have any clue what these ads are about? What these ads are about is Republicans who signed a fair tax pledge thing to replace the income tax system with a giant sales tax. It is a wacky far-right economic scheme, and yes, some Republicans say this wacky far-right economic scheme to replace the income tax with a sales tax, a giant sales tax, is a good idea. Okay, You ever heard of it otherwise? Really, have you? It's one thing to refuse to run on what you believe. It is another thing to say, you know what, actually I want to run on what the other guy believes. I want to run on their talking points and their political one-liners. Tax bad. So I'm going to invent an issue out of whole cloth that has no national translation whatsoever, that won't resonate with anything anybody's ever read in the news, read on a blog, seen on cable TV, or heard from their neighbor while mowing their lawn, something that has never appeared on any other ad ever. I will pick an issue that is totally unconnected to everything else I know is going on in the country and try to make you, the voter, believe that everything you suspect is true about me is actually maybe true about the other guy. Maybe we can deliberately sort of confuse the differences. The other guy's most effective and cost-efficient response is probably to laugh at this and wait until I run out of money in this campaign and then just blanket me with, you want to talk about taxes? Let's talk taxes, you Democrat. This strategy I do not understand. Joining us now is the man who is most likely to be able to explain it to me. It is Congressman Chris Van Hollen, head of the House Democratic Campaign Committee. He's the man in charge of getting Democrats reelected to the House. Mr. Van Hollen, thank you so much for your time tonight.
It's good to be with you, Rachel.
I butted together there the segments from all of these different DCCC ads talking about Republicans as tax raisers. I got to say, this strategy makes no sense to me.
Well, Rachel, as you know, we're running ads all over the country. We've got more than 50 races where there are going to be different ads, and some are on Social Security and Medicare. Some are on making sure that we call the Republicans out on their refusal to end tax breaks that support multinational corporations that ship our jobs overseas. And some relate to this issue where Republicans have essentially said they want to reduce the taxes for the folks at the very top. In other words, they don't want to have an income tax. Instead, they want to raise the sales taxes on everybody else. So anytime you go to the store and buy something, you're going to have to pay a tax. And at the same time, they would reduce the tax rates for the folks at the very, very top, which is clearly unfair. Now, I heard what you had to say in your lead in here. I should say that both in 2006 and 2008, the election years where you said the Democrats won a lot of seats in those districts, that ad was used in a lot of those districts because it cut through some of the nonsense the Republicans were talking about, where they said only Democrats were wanting to raise taxes. And what this says very clearly is no, Republicans want to raise taxes. It's just they want to raise taxes in a way that hurts the middle class. This is a way to raise taxes that hurts people when they go out and buy goods at the store, as opposed to the Democrats who said, you know, you should do it based on your income. If you've got a lot higher income, you should pay more. So that, and again, this was a kind of ad that was played in those previous years as well.
And you know, and I can't speak to whether or not this ends up working in individual districts. What seems strange to me from a national perspective is that there's a lot of people in the Democratic Party right now focusing on messaging nationally this idea that Republicans want to hold tax cuts for the middle class, 98% of the country, hostage so that they can give extra tax cuts to rich people. That the idea that Republicans want to hold out $250,000 of income and above for additional tax cuts and nobody else gets tax relief otherwise. The sort of Republicans looking out for the rich guys on these tax guys on the tax issues. This message, bluntly, the way it comes across in the ads is Republicans want to raise the taxes. Seems like it's just designed to obfuscate the differences between Republicans and Democrats rather than pushing a national message that might resonate coast to coast.
Well, Rachel, as you know, under the Obama administration, we've seen a series of tax cuts for middle-class Americans. In other words, as part of the whole recovery bill, about one-third of it was tax relief for 95% of the working Americans. We've also seen tax relief for small businesses. It is the Republicans, as you said, who are saying, you know, we're only going to allow tax relief for 98% of the American people to go forward if you guys give a tax break to the folks at the very top, even though it blows a $700 billion hole in the deficit. And by the way, the so-called small businesses that they say they're going to be helping are the big Washington law firms, the KKRs of the world, big leveraged buyout firms. Those are the people the Republicans are trying to fool into believing are small businesses. These other ads, again, that were played in the past, show how disconnected some of these Republican candidates are when they say, let's reduce taxes on the folks at the very top, and we're going to compensate for that by raising taxes on everything else you buy, a national sales tax, which we all know is a very regressive form of taxation. So in many of these races, it's not clear where the other guy is on a particular issue, but we know where they stand on this one because they've signed a particular pledge or form. And again, we're now talking about a couple ads out of a whole universe of ads, many of which are on the Social Security issue, the Medicare issue, the question of making sure we don't ship American jobs overseas, what we've done for veterans compared to some of the votes Republicans have taken that do not support our veterans in terms of health care. So you've got a whole menu of ads, and I will say that what the people look at is each of these districts and what they think is most effective in a particular district.
I guess this is the not a national message strategy, but district by district local messaging strategy at work for all of the confusion Rachel, that it leads to.
Well, no, let me just say, look, the national message has been pretty clear. The national message is this: the Republicans want to take us back to a set of economic policies that benefited a small group of special interests at the expense of consumers and taxpayers and workers. They want to take us back to the days before we passed Wall Street reform, when the folks on Wall Street called the shots and it was everybody else who paid for their mistakes. They want to take us back to a time when they're going to give tax breaks to those Washington lobbying firms, and they want to keep in place these tax provisions, very perverse tax provisions, that reward more multinational corporations for shipping American jobs overseas. In other words, they have put the profits of overseas corporations above the interests of American workers and consumers. So the overall framework has been Republicans want to go back to an economic policy that for 8 years favored very narrow special interests, whether they were health insurance companies, big oil companies, or Wall Street firms, at the expense of everybody else. And those are the kind of ads that you're seeing played around the country. This is just one example that you've picked out that deals with this fair tax idea, which is an example of Republicans saying, hey, let's shift the tax burden to the middle class and give the folks at the very top a break.
And honestly, the way it plays out on the ground is as an exception to the national message with that you just laid out. But, you know, understanding that as the multiplicity of the ways that different Democrats can approach these issues is part of understanding what Democrats are doing this year. And I'm thankful to you for helping us understand it, Congressman Van Hollen. Thank you.
Good to be with you, Rachel. Thanks.
Congressman Chris Van Hollen is head of the House Democratic Campaign Committee. He's also a Democrat, of course, from the great state of Maryland. All right.